All right, so this morning we are working on another Lightroom work session. We're going to be editing a few photos and working on kind of some specific editing styles, specifically trying to warm up a background, direct attention to a subject, and then look at some of the interesting ways that we can use the adjustment brush in our editing. So I've got Lynn with me, some of her photos to work on and some of the questions that she had earlier. So let's get on with this. We've got a nice image of a young gentleman in a fetching hat here to edit. And correct me if I'm wrong, Len, but I believe one of your questions was how do you sort of warm up the background and get that
Right.
that editing style that is sort of warm, that orange background, and everything sort of directs attention to the subject.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're going to see if we can do that. So let me see, let me get to the development module here. So in general, when it comes to warming things up, often we're talking about white balance, right? The little slider up here is a good place to start, or this eyedropper. The slider, blue to orange, if we want to warm something up, we move it over to the right, we move it to the orange, and you can see that indeed the background does change to that orange. The problem with that slider is that it's a global adjustment, right? Everything in the photo is going to get that orange to it. And at some point, you might get the background color that you want, but in doing that, you've really changed your subject. So to do this right today, what we have to do is we have to do something that's not global, or we have to fix only part of the image. So when it comes to that kind of thing, what we need to do is we need to only edit some of it, and the right tool for that job in a lot of cases is the adjustment brush. Another good tool for that job is the radial filter. So let's start with the adjustment brush here. Um, what you sort of know how to use, you select that. If you're into keyboard shortcuts, you can hit K, and that will bring it up. The mouse wheel will adjust the size of the brush. You can see it getting bigger or smaller. You can also do that down here with the brush size slider. And then you see how it has two rings, right? That center ring and that outer ring. That center to outer area is where the feather occurs, and that's, you can see when you move this, that changes the size of the feathered in area. And so if we start, I'm going to select this so you can see what's getting painted. So as I paint, it's turning red. Now that's not coloring the background red, that's just showing you the area that's being covered with this tool. So if we uncheck that, we can see we have this active dot and that mask has disappeared, but that's the area that will be affected. So if I move the slider to the orange here, it's just adjusting that half, that section. You can see what's going on there. So by using that tool and this slider, we could warm up just these areas that we want to and not affect our subject at all. All right, so that's one way to start. And of course, this is all up to you and your personal style of how warm you're looking to make it. And then a couple of things you could do, you could say maybe that's not warm enough. You could always lay down a second layer on top of that. Right? Continue to compound those adjustments. Or for this task, I've got my pin selected, and again, you can see the area that that is covering, everything around the subject. We could go down here and we could add a color. And by clicking one of these colors, you can hold and drag around and find like that warm look you might be looking for. And I don't know how warm you like your backgrounds there, Lynn, but somewhere around there is going to be a decent start.
Yeah, that looks, well, that's a little yellow for me, but um, so in order to not get his hat yellow.
Uh-huh.
You just make the slider smaller.
Well, in order to not get his hat yellow, we're going to be a little better with how we brush this in. So there's two things you could do. One, you can overlap the edges, right? You can see I'm filling in that green,
Oh, okay, I see.
and that's sort of intruding in on the hat and on his skin. So then down here, your brush selection, you've got A, B, and erase. So if I go to erase, and I can see where my mask is, I can come in and I can remove it from the areas that I didn't mean to put it in the first place.
Oh, okay.
So that's one. Although even that, it's sort of tough. You can see where I erased an area where I wanted it. All right. So you can spend a lot of time trying to do it that way, and it might work. But one of the other nice features is the auto mask. Right here, this checkbox. And auto mask sort of tries to figure out where the natural boundaries are. So what I'm going to do to make this easier is I'm really going to erase it so it's not on the hat at all. And not on his cute little arms there. Alright, so you can see we have this halo that we need to fill in. So going back to the A brush, which is just the add your mask, I have auto mask selected, and as I go around it, you will see that it goes right up to that boundary line. And it sort of finds that space as we go around. And you may have to adjust the size of your brush as you get into those tighter corners. Alright, and one more little patch of green there. Okay, so now we turn off that overlay. And
That
now,
overlay was a pretty color.
yeah. So if you like that color, that was just sort of red, so we can move this around until we find that shade of red that you like. Again, doing it to taste there. That's sort of the one of the real easy ways to use that adjustment brush to fill in those areas around.
Yep, gotta mute you again.
And then, of course, that's just using the color temperature and the color here. You could also either, if there was too much going on in the background, which this photo really doesn't have a problem with, is it has a nice shallow depth of field, but you could move that clarity slider, soften it up some, or tighten it down if you wanted, but you probably for background want to soften that up just a little. You can change that contrast and either make it a little more stark or a little less. So we'll go with maybe just a little bit less. Now when it comes to how do we direct attention to the subject, so I'm deselecting the adjustment brush here. So when the eye sort of travels through this photo, this is a really good example of a photo where that you have a strong subject. There's not a lot of distraction in the background here. There's some, maybe like these orange dots here. They're sort of pulling the eye away. But what else can we do to really force the eye to come in to the center? And one of the tricks that people use, and it's easy to overdo it, but again, it's a stylistic choice, is down here in the effects panel, this post-crop vignette. And you just grab the slider and you can slide it to the left, and if we overdo it, you'll see what you're doing. You're just sort of dimming those corners. But if you do it just a subtle amount, it sort of forces the eye to go into this brighter area of contrast. And so that's one trick you can do there. Then if we just sort of look around, we can say, okay, our eye is distracted here and here and here. So what can we do to get rid of those? We're going to use the spot removal tool right here, and the same with the adjustment brush. You just roll that mouse wheel or change the size here. and we have it set on heal. So I'm just going to paint over that orange spot, give it a second, and it will look around and figure out, all right, it's going to replace it with this spot right here. We can go and do the same click over here, and it finds a nice spot to replace it, and a click there, and now we deselect that, and now we are sort of distraction free around the edges. Kind of the difference between where was it, here, where you've got these things vying for attention, and here, where now all the attention is here. Now he has a tiny little spot on his head. Again, this is a good job for the spot removal tool. So we'll just change that size, do a little control click, find something that blends in perfectly. And now that's getting better. One other thing we could do is, he does look a little bit on the blue side, especially since we've warmed this up so much. So maybe we can adjust the global temperature to bring him up to just slightly warmer. Nice, happy orange pink baby. All right. And then after that, of course, it's start bringing in presence, which local contrast will make him pop a little more. Experiment with maybe a little bit of contrast. Bring out the eye color. A little bit of highlight reduction to fix some of those blown out spots. But overall, I think that hopefully shows you how to warm something up, how to bring that attention in on your subject. So the difference from there to there.
Yes, it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge difference.
Yeah. And then, of course, like I said, this is always style. You have to have that idea of where you wanted to go in the first place in order to know when you're there. So if this isn't the right background color for you, remember that adjustment brush. You can come in and you can really change that stuff up. You can make it maybe a little more natural, late summer evening, fall, or you can get artistic, get creative with it, and look for something more interesting.
Okay,
and of course, if you want to get really dramatic and punchy, you can bring in more vignette. You can bring in other darker contrastier filters to find that style that you're looking for.
well, I've always been scared to really mess with those because I get that rainbow effect.
Right. That. Let me see if we can artificially make that. The rainbow effect you're talking about is normally when you're trying to edit a JPEG. A lot of times when that happens. And the JPEG just doesn't have enough color and brightness information to make for a smooth gradient. So
okay.
As you increase the contrast, you're sort of separating those bands farther and farther away until it becomes easier to see. So in this case, we are editing a JPEG, but it doesn't have that smooth gradient transition anywhere because of the way the background was.
Well, that makes sense because I was actually trying to edit a lighthouse shot, and I must have been using the JPEG instead of the RAW file.
Yeah.
Because the rainbows appeared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sky is a real common place you're going to see that.
Yes. So I shouldn't see that in a RAW.
Well, it's certainly possible. I mean, it's any time that you are really trying to edit those gradients. If you get too contrast, you get them too far spread, you'll see them. But RAW is going to be less likely to show that to you than a JPEG would anyway.
Okay,
right.
Great.
So that's a baby, and then second one was this one, and I really, when I started working on this image, liked it from the standpoint of how many different things we could do with the adjustment brush to work on this image. And so let's see, where do we start? Same idea, we want to warm this up. We want to bring the attention to the subject and remove some of the distracting items. A really good depth of field here where the background is nice and blurry. We've got some good bokeh going on. Some of the distracting images or parts of the image I see though is this green of this person walking by and this person back here, and maybe a few of the sweatery flakes that look like cotton or something stuck on there. So we'll see if we can work on those. Same issue as the other is that trying to bring her skin up to orange or the background up to orange, I'm sorry, makes the skin really show as super orange. It gets unnatural quickly. So we're going to have to, of course, lighten it up or do the same approach that we did with the other. Is we'll fix the background with the adjustment brush. But the other thing I noticed is it looked like maybe a gold reflector was being used or some kind of sun reflector. Does that sound right? Because I couldn't quite figure out. You see how right here it looks like it's a different color temperature of light than right here and right here.
Well, I either used a polarizer or a UV filter.
But no reflector, like a bounce sunlight in there?
I did have a reflector that day.
Okay, so I think that's what it is. You can kind of see if you look closely. You see how this is blue, purple, this is orange, this is blue, purple, orange, blue. So we have some mixed lighting. And you can see that change as we slide this warming filter up. So when you finally get the skin here to be nice skin tony, this is way over oranged. So there's some mixed lighting that we need to deal with. And one of the ways we can do that is by starting with the adjustment brush. So what I want to do here is make sure that this is zeroed out. I'm going to just try to bring the skin tones to be the same throughout the face. So I'm going to start by painting over the orange areas and turn on my mask and you can see what I'm doing there. We're going to paint there. We're going to paint right around down here. And then I'm actually going to cool this down. Not too much, but you can see what I'm trying to do here is to balance the skin so that it's a uniform color temperature. And because there's different intensities of that light in different places, we may have to add a couple of layers to do it entirely. So we'll click a new one here and we'll bring this down. Again, what I'm trying to do here is just match up these patches of skin. Bring a new one to work on the face. Alright, so she's all nice and purple now. So now when we add in that global slider, you can see that she's coming in more evenly. I guess she's warming up with the rest of the photo. Alright, so that's a starting point. We could still probably come in here and find areas that could be warmed up and balanced out a little bit better. Get that nose warmed up. Okay, so where are we so far on that? So yeah, now you can see we've removed these bands of sort of unbalanced color temperature. And so now we can go to work on the what we want to do with the rest of the image. And of course we could do that same thing where we come in here and we just greatly paint around, filling out that background, making it warm. We could do it the same way, but this time let's try a different approach. Let's use we're going to use the radial filter. So with a radial filter, you click and you hold and you draw a circle or an oval. You can see you can change the shape depending on how you drag it. So I'm just going to draw a circle around her face, and I'm actually even going to tilt it to match sort of how her face is. Now, just like it's a gradient, but it's going to emanate from a center point. So to over exaggerate, well, one, we can see the mask that we created right here on her face, and we want to edit the parts around her. So I'm actually going to click this Invert Mask, and now you can see the mask is more out here in the edges, and her face is being left alone. All right, so same deal is you can come up here and you can change these sliders, and you're going to notice what happens is that those changes are taking effect mostly outside of that circle. So we can warm up the background. We could change the exposure out there if we wanted, and you can see as we change that exposure down, it sort of forces the eye towards the middle, towards your subject. Now it's very easy to get unnatural looking by doing that, so you have to be careful how much you're doing it. But that's one little approach you can do. And we find that sort of works. And you can do the same thing with the color that we were doing earlier. You can come out here and adjust it to shades and find that look that you're going for. Somewhere around there is obviously quite warm. And then the same trick with the vignetting. You can pull that down and that'll force the eye in a little bit more. Now sometimes you start doing this and what it'll do is it'll really make things look a little too colorful, a little too saturated. So maybe we bring down the saturation. So we've warmed it up, but now we're going to pull it back just a little bit with the overall saturation. All right, and now sort of looking at what we want to do next. What could help? What could be fixed? And I'm thinking, let's get rid of these distractions. Now, you could, of course, use this spot removal and paint that person out, and it'll look around and it'll do an okay job. But when I look at this, I see these two spots here that are kind of standing out to me as obviously being cloned. But you could go in and work on that some more and make it work. But let's see what we could do with the adjustment brush. So right here we're going to go with the adjustment brush. I'm going to remove all the settings and I'm just going to paint over that green. So this spot is really standing out because it's green. So what if we pulled out the saturation some? Not too much because it'll start turning black and white and be obvious. But we could pull out the saturation to deaden that green up, push the purple up a little, push the orange up a little, and then change the color down here to be something that blends in a little bit better with background. And then you could continue to work on that to pull out the green some. I think that's in this image anyway, you could keep doing that and keep working to bring out that green, and it would do okay. But another thing you could do, in using all the tools that that are available to you, is when we look in this, looking around, there aren't very many other green patches. All right, so that may be a good use for messing with your channels down here. We could just remove the green channel completely here, and it is only affecting that part of the image. If you look around as we slide that, nothing else is really changing. You could use the luminance to sort of get rid of it, and maybe even change the channel or the hue of it to turn the greens more yellow, right? To fade that out. Right, so you can sort of see the kind of subtle change, the subtle way to hide that in the background a little more. But probably in the grand scheme of things with this editing, do part of that and then partly spot removal just to really blend it in there. And you could do the same thing over here. And so that sort of hides your background. And now, again, you're just looking for ways that you can kind of push the view in. We've already done the vignette, so you can see that pushing the gaze into the subject a bit. And then you've got this bright area down here in the corner that you could use the adjustment brush on to get rid of some of those highlights. Just darken that up a little bit, and that'll push the eye towards the middle. And then we have the question of the hair. You see these highlights that are blown out here. We can use the highlight setting on the adjustment brush to pull it back a little bit. If it's completely blown out, there's really nothing to pull back, but in some of these areas you can get quite a bit of detail back. And after that, it's just a matter of, I still think that maybe this skin down here is a little too dark compared to her skin on her face. So we could use the adjustment brush to kind of bring those back into balance some. So now we have a sort of much warmer photo than we did at the beginning. Some of the distractions you can see in the background, those have been sort of mitigated a bit. We could still work on this area of red right here. You could take some of that red out. Make it not as obvious. And then the other thing, of course, she has nice, pretty white teeth, but since we've warmed this up so much, we've sort of turned her teeth yellow. So we can use that adjustment brush, get down here to tooth sized, and we're going to brighten up the highlights and take out a little bit of the orange that we have added so much of. Again, we have to be careful where we've drawn that mask because we're also messing with her lips there. Alright, so that might actually, if we erase that, might be a good place to use the auto mask and just work on the teeth, which I wasn't zoomed in far enough for that to work. There we go. Alright, so now I turn that mask off and we can see what we're doing. You could get way too white and bright there, so we're looking for more subtle to just undo some of that yellowing action that we did. Yeah. So now that side by side, you can see how we've warmed things up, gotten rid of some of the distractions.
It's a huge difference. And I never would have thought to look at the hair as being blown out on those highlights.
Yeah, and I mean it's not too blown out, but once you start really looking for things that you can change or improve, that starts standing out. And the more you start improving or getting rid of the distractions, the more other distractions show themselves. So now that we've gotten rid of the background distractions for the most part, and I might even go in and take out this guy's shirt a little more. Let's see, we're going to trick it into letting us add another one over top. Get rid of that, get rid of one of those legs, and now that breaks up that form even a little more. So now to me the distractions, if any, start to be what's going on with the sweater. And it looks like this probably isn't dirt on her sweater or something, it's built into the fabric, but when we're just looking at it from an image, we keep getting drawn down here to these spots of high contrast. So let's get rid of a few of those. I'm going to reduce down to just the necessary amount and go clicking through, and I'm just letting Lightroom decide what is the best place for it to clone from, and we'll watch and make sure that it does a good job. Like there, I'm not sure that we should be cloning from skin. You can kind of see how that got fuzzy instead of looking sweater. So we can grab where it picked and just drag it over here and put it back onto the clothing. But for the most part, it's doing a pretty good job of making those decisions. Here it picked an area of dots, so we'll move that. And we'll do that one more. We won't do all these. But now you can kind of see in here, this is competing for attention. In this version, it's much cleaner now, so the focus is really staying up here. And then one of the other interesting things I noticed about this photo is, it was taken back in, I think, 2008. So this is quite old as far as digital camera technology goes anyway. And so the noise is kind of apparent when you go in there and look at 100%, just because that's what we had to work with back in the day. So what can we do to get rid of some of that noise without doing a kind of a damaging it globally? Because down here there is a let's see, sorry, that's there we go. Down here there's a global noise corrector, but you can see what happens to the face as we use this globally. See how that face softens up, and now it looks like we've just doctored her up way too much. Right, the difference between here, right, where you've got some natural lines, it looks like a person should, and the difference here, where her eyes have softened up, the skin is way too soft. Right, so, but the background looks better. So what we want to do is we want to apply that sort of noise reduction to the background and not so much to her. So again, we've got a job for the adjustment brush. So we click on the adjustment brush. I'm resetting it. I'm double clicking the effect button right there, and if a slider was set, when you double click that, it resets everything to 0 for you. Right down here there's one called noise, and so I'm going to crank up the noise correction, and I'm just going to brush over the background some. And you can sort of see how that background is smoothing up. It's getting rid of that noise. But it hasn't affected her. All right, so maybe we do want to do some noise correction on her. but not as much. We don't want to mess with the nice looking skin so much. So we'll come in and we'll just do some of those areas where the noise is obviously high and a little distracting. There we go. So we've applied the noise correction just where we wanted it and haven't messed with the details around the eyes, the sharpness. That would be distracting there. And so if we zoom in and let this render full size, you can kind of see, let's see, spot removal. Yeah, you can kind of see the noise correction that we've done there. It's subtle, but on that zoomed out image, it has a large impact. The other trick we can do is with sharpening. So right now we are sharpening this image like we do with pretty much any of them. You can see as I move this sharpening slider, look right up here at this window. This is what's giving you a preview. So this is a zoomed in area. You can select where you want to go. So maybe you want to look at the skin or the background or something. But we're just looking for an area of an area where we can see the detail. So as this is down at 0, it doesn't do any sharpening. As we crank this up, you can see it sharpens each pixel. And in a noisy image, if you are applying sharpening to everything, well, the problem is that you are sharpening the noise and just making it more apparent. So by using this slider down here, which you have to have some amount of sharpening in so you can use it, this masking slider, if you hold down the Alt button as you move this, the entire image will turn into a mask, and the areas that are white are the areas that will get the sharpening. So over here with 0, everything gets sharpened. As you slide to the right, if you go all the way to the right, then barely anything is getting sharpened. So you're looking for that happy medium where it's sort of like a pencil drawing of your image, and those are going to be the areas that get sharpening applied to it. So somewhere around here for this image, that means that only those lines, right, those lines are going to get the sharpening. So then when we change this sharpening slider, we're not sharpening all the noise, we're just sharpening those lines. And you can do the same with the radius and the detail. They will sort of change the amount of noise that you sharpen or don't. But the bigger impact you're going to see is just by using this mask to begin with. All right, so we've got our before and after. So how does that look to you?
It looks great.
There's
huge differences. And I should have used the brush long before now, because that's really handy.
It really is, and the neat thing about using the brush is so many of these options, and as you learn like what each one of these does, well, then you can apply it in just areas that you want to use it. Say we wanted to get, I won't call it artsy, but somebody who's into some real heavy editing, you wanted to bring these eyes out more. Well, you could get in here with just the adjustment brush and hit these irises, and you can bring those out. You can make those pop a little more, and then you could get crazy and start changing eye color. And a lot of that stuff, people will go into Photoshop to do, but with a little bit of work and practice in Lightroom, there are so many things that you can do like that. And we'll take that back. Yeah, so adjustment brush, very, very powerful tool, worth learning. And so is the radial filter. So when you start playing with that, you can really create some impact in your photos.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you brought out that radial filter.
And one other handy one is the gradient filter. Same idea. When you select this, you get all these little tools and options here. The gradient filter, you will click and drag and move it to where you want. So it goes from most filter to least filter. So I laid it right to left there, and I'm going to way overdo this so you can see what it's doing. Right. So what I want to do with this is actually one thing that I think is still distracting is this bright corner down here in the right. It's just a little bit brighter than these other three. It's grabbing for attention. So we could come in here again and use the adjustment brush and try to even this up. Right, try to paint that out. And we could do okay, but it would take a while to get just the right fade in there to make it look good. So instead of using the adjustment brush this time, what I would like to do is use the gradient filter. Oops, go back to that. Use the gradient filter. There we go. And drag it in from the corner. And that applies a nice smooth transition effect that you can move after the fact if you want. And then just you can kind of see it changes from that bright corner to a little bit darker, which keeps the eye traveling inside the photo instead of fighting to come out of this corner.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Good. All right.
Bad photo for 2008.
No, and that's one of the, I was sitting there thinking about it. It's one of the kind of cool things about RAW files is that had this been shot in JPEG, you would just have sort of been stuck with the photo on the left. That's what you'd always have. But with RAW, as your software increases, as your editing ability increases, you'll just be able to go back to those older photos and apply your newer techniques and get better results. Oh, it sounds like she's getting wound up now.
Sorry, I've lost the button.
No worries, no worries. All right, so I think unless you have any more big questions, that sort of wraps up this editing. Oh, looks like, yeah, I think you're muted now. I can't quite hear you.
Okay, there. No, that answers a lot of questions. So
All right.
it worked
Good.
out really well. I can't wait to have some time to practice with that.
Yeah, there you go. Just start working on that adjustment brush. Start looking for interesting ways that you can put it to use.
Okay. Yeah, I will. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.